welcome. It's wonderful to have you all here this evening for this very special dialogue. My name is Hannah Smith, and if you joined us at the Emory Compassion Center for an event in the last few years, you probably have seen me on this podium, but if I haven't met you, it's wonderful to meet you today. I've had the honor of serving as one of the chairs on Emory's organizing committee for a Year of Compassion, which is a year-long initiative that began last fall in celebration of the 90th birthday of Emory's Presidential Distinguished Professor, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whose shared vision with Emory University of an education of heart and mind continues to inspire and sustain the work that we do at the Emory Compassion Center. This evening, we come together in exciting anticipation of the forthcoming book by Dr. Lobsang Tenzin Negi, Executive Director of the Emory Compassion Center and Teaching Professor within the Department of Religion. The book is called Engage Compassion, 7 Practices to Cultivate Resilience, Connection, and a Joyous Life. In a world where burnout, disconnection, and violence have become pervasive, many are yearning for peace, connection, compassion, and ultimately improved well-being. Rooted in modern science and Buddhist contemplative meditative traditions, Engage Compassion introduces a 7-step path to cultivating lasting well-being through CBCT, Cognitively Based Compassion Training, a program developed by Dr. Negi at the Emory Compassion Center. The book really brings together profound insights and practices in a way that's accessible and meaningful for all in their everyday life. So to begin our event, I'm very pleased to welcome Emory College Dean Joseph Crispino, a distinguished historian whose leadership has advanced Emory's commitment to scholarship, civic engagement, and thoughtful dialogue, and whose support of the Emory Compassion Center has been truly invaluable. Dean Crispino.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is a busy time on our campus. You know, as we move through commencement and the closing of the academic year here with the end of classes and before we celebrate commencement on Monday, it's a natural moment to pause and reflect and take stock of the work that is so important to this university. And tonight is very much in that spirit. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this conversation with Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi, moderated by our very own Gary Hawk. We're grateful to both of them for making space for what I know will be a very meaningful discussion, and for all of you for being part of it. The gathering also comes at an important moment. Geshe Lobsang's new book, Engage Compassion, which you just heard about, will be released next week. This reflects his years of work as a scholar, a teacher, a practitioner. And while tonight is not a book launch per se, it is an opportunity to engage the ideas behind this work and to recognize and honor the depth and reach of your contributions. This evening also marks one of the concluding moments of Emory's Year of Compassion, a campus-wide reflection on the role that compassion plays in how we learn, lead, and engage with one another. It's fitting that we close out that chapter here in a space that has long been at the center of that work. For more than 2 decades, Geshe Lobsang has helped shape something truly distinctive here at Emory. The Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics stands as a model for what can happen when rigorous academic inquiry is paired with a commitment to human development. It brings together science, ethics, and the contemplative life in ways that are both intellectually rigorous and spiritually enriching. That work is extended well beyond this campus. It's extended all over the world. It has influenced how we think about education, about leadership, and about the role of compassion in public life. And it has done so in a way that reflects the best of the liberal arts, connecting disciplines, perspectives, and communities. Tonight's format reflects that spirit. It's an opportunity to listen, to reflect, and to engage. And we'll have time for your questions as well. And I encourage you all to ask many questions and take part in this exchange. And just in closing, I want to say that I have been in the dean's office for the past 2 years, in the interim dean's role since January. But in my role in the dean's office, being the main point person who's been in contact with Geshe Lobsang and the Compassion Center, it has been, the best part of that job has been getting to know the work of the Compassion Center and being involved with it in just the small ways that I have been. And I say this all the time, I have to say it to this crowd, is that, here at Emory, we do not have a football team. We have the Compassion Center. And what I mean by that, truly, it's actually a serious comment, because the Compassion Center is the thing at this institution that everybody loves to be affiliated with and would love to be associated with. It is something that we are all enormously, enormously proud of, and so grateful to you, Geshe Lobsang, for all of your work. So thank you again for being here and for your continued engagement with all of the important work of the Compassion Center.
Thank you, Dean Crispino. I was in a meeting with Dean Crispino earlier today, and he made the comment about the football team, and I immediately called up our marketing friends. So we need to change our whole approach here. It's amazing. As a former Emory student, that really resonates. Okay, now I'd like to warmly welcome Dean Emeritus Dr. Robert A. Paul, a distinguished anthropologist and longtime Emory leader whose vision and intellectual curiosity helped lay the foundation for the work that we're here to celebrate tonight. His early field work in the Himalayan region sparked a deep engagement with Tibetan culture and philosophy, and when Dr. Negi first arrived in Atlanta, Dr. Paul was instrumental in guiding him into the Emory community and shaping the earliest form of what is now the Emory Compassion Center. We would likely not be sitting here at all today without him, so I'm very honored that he's here to give some brief remarks.
Thank you, Hannah. That's great. I'm just so pleased and honored to help introduce this evening's fireside chat with my dear friends and colleagues, Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi and Dr. Gary Hawk, in celebration of the imminent publication of Geshe Lobsang's latest book, Engaged Compassion, 7 Practices for Cultivating Resilience. Earlier this academic year, as you've already heard, Emory joined with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's Year of Compassion, inaugurating a compassion shift that is intended to try to reset the world's agenda from ruthless competition among individuals and nations and the violence and war that have distressed us all, and to refocus on humanity's inherent peaceful sociality and the pursuit of happiness enshrined in our own nation's founding document. By highlighting compassion, His Holiness and those working with him in his endeavors draw attention to a couple of fairly obvious but too often ignored truths. One of these is that by its nature, compassion is something that happens between 2 or more people. While it's true that one can have compassion for oneself in a manner of speaking, that is not the word's principal sense. Compassion is something that happens between and among people in a community, not just within one soul. The idea of compassion makes us aware that the quest for personal fulfillment alone cannot bring happiness unless it takes place and allows us to thrive in a community of people for whom we feel compassion and whose compassion and care for us in turn helps sustain us. How could we be happy in the society of only self-seeking individuals, or in a world which, no matter how fortunate our present circumstances may be, we know that others are caught in the midst of brutal conflicts for which they are in no way responsible, but in which they nonetheless will come to grievous harm and suffer dreadful loss. The second truth is that compassion is not a virtue found only among the rare great saints of the world, but it's a natural human capacity, and one which, though it may be stifled in present circumstances, our own and those around us, can be learned and enhanced by anyone, by proven techniques and practices that are within the reach of anybody. Geshe Lobsang has devoted his astonishingly energetic and accomplished career precisely to the formulation of such effective techniques and practices with the aim in view of increasing the sum of human happiness by making them known and within the reach of anyone and everybody. The book whose publication we celebrate tonight is another milestone in that quest, putting in the hands of any and all methods which, through the efforts of Geshe-la and others, have proved to enlarge our capacity for compassion, and so for building a more caring and loving community and world. Tonight, Geshe-la will speak about his work in his new book with one of Emory's own great sages, Gary Hawk, who has served under 5 university presidents as a close counselor and confidant, and who, from his high positions in the administration, has been a crucial figure in realizing the fantastic successes that Geshe Lobsang and his co-workers have created here on our campus and literally around the world. The Dalai Lamas, of whom the present one is the 14th, are believed by Tibetan Buddhists to be incarnations of the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, or in Tibetan Chenrezig. Geshe Lobsang, who, as an advocate for His Holiness's message and someone who was personally close to him, thus speaks of compassion directly from the source. We are privileged tonight to receive it from him in person, as will be the many people whom Geshe Lobsang's book will certainly reach and whose lives it will certainly enrich. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. It's now my pleasure to introduce our conversation partners for tonight, and Dr. Paul so beautifully introduced Dr. Hawk, so I won't go too much into detail, but just to add that, like Dr. Paul, Dr. Hawk has been so instrumental in building what today is the Emory Compassion Center, from organizing His Holiness the Dalai Lama's landmark visits to helping formalize our collaborations with Tibetan institutions. His leadership and scholarship has helped create a space where science and spirituality, intellect and compassion come into meaningful dialogue, while also preserving the history and the impact of this unique partnership for generations to come. So we're so fortunate that he will be here tonight to guide this conversation. And of course, it's my great honor to introduce Dr. Lobsang Tenzin Negi, whose legacy here at Emory and around the world I can't even begin to briefly state, even if I tried. He's a former Tibetan monk and scholar trained in the great monastic universities, and he was encouraged by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to engage deeply with Western science, particularly the study of mind and emotion. That journey brought him here to Emory, where he went on to earn his PhD and begin the work of building bridges between contemplative traditions and modern science for the benefit of humanity. Over the past several decades, through the Emory Compassion Center and its groundbreaking programs, Dr. Negi has significantly contributed to the global compassion movement and has been a pioneer in the emerging field of contemplative science. The book we'll hear about today, Engage Compassion, officially releases on May 12th. If you've not yet pre-ordered your copy, you'll see signs and QR codes posted all around the museum to do so. And if you would like to continue this conversation with Dr. Negi, our friends at Drepung Losling Monastery, just 20 minutes north of here, will be hosting a special book signing event on Sunday, May 17th at noon, and additional information will be sent to you via email. But do know that, as Dean Crispino said, this isn't the formal book launch, but we hope you'll be able to get your copy and get it signed by Geshe Lobsang at a later date. So with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Hawk and Dr. Lobsang Tenzin Negi for what promises to be a thoughtful and engaging conversation.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Bobby, and thanks to all of you for being here this evening, and thank you especially to my dear friend Lobsang for writing this book and bringing it to our attention, about which we will say much more in a moment. It's a joy and a privilege for me to be in conversation with you, Lobsang. As you know, we have been friends now for more than 3 decades since we met while arranging a visit from His Holiness to Atlanta way back in 1995. And our friendship has been, for me, the occasion of some of the more memorable moments in my career and indeed my life. So thank you for that and for your long friendship. I want to begin by quoting the first paragraph from Lobsang's book. I don't know if you remember that you wrote this. Imagine becoming a person who instinctively brings kindness into every interaction, one who is remembered for their warmth and generosity, one who lifts up those around them, who remains steady and unshaken, fierce when necessary, for example, in the face of injustice, yet never reactive or consumed by anger. A person who creates a sense of belonging, who connects with others at a deeper level wherever they go. Now, I know that you'll object when I say this, but based on my 3-decade friendship with you, Lobsang, I would say this very much sounds like Lobsang Tenzin Negi. Would you care to comment?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for serving this role this evening, and I really deeply appreciate our friendship all these years. I'm also very thankful to my mentor, former Dean Dr. Paul. Dr. Paul has been, these two individuals have been the reason we are here today. Absolutely. Emory Tibet Partnership, the program that was known in the beginning, and then now the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. This would not be here without their guidance, support, really, is over the years. Whenever there was a need that I needed some guidance, support, they were there for me. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here this evening. I know that this is a kind of the end of the day. It's, you all are busy, but taking this time to be here, it means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Now, this beginning sentences, I was really thinking it's not me for sure. It doesn't apply for me. But I was thinking about, one person that whatever I know and whatever is captured in this book really comes from, and that is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He has been an inspiration. He has been everything that in these few words that is said, and much more. So it's His Holiness.
All right, we'll let you off the hook on that. Say something, if you would, about how you came to write this book. I know that it has been percolating since you were age 11 when you hitched a ride on an army truck to leave your town and go meet up with your brother in a town far away, and that began a lifelong journey. But what is it about this moment that has led you to distill your many decades of research and teaching and practice into this volume?
Yeah, thank you for that question, but also bringing up my journey as a 11-year-old young person leaving my hometown. I actually left at age 11 to pursue my studies. I'm from the Himalayas, very remote place. We had school, of course, but I wanted to have a little bit more than what I was getting there. So I left my hometown, and in those days, there was only one bus that went through and I missed that bus. So I hitchhiked with the military truck because it's a border region, so, a lot of the military trucks go through there. Now, about this book itself, when I did my PhD finally here in 1999, I remember Dr. Paul asking me about, what do you want to do with this? And I don't know if you remember that, Dr. Paul, but I said that, I would like to share this with a more kind of the general audience, that, of course, that over the years I had the opportunity to work with great friends here at our center, and we do have the guidebooks on how to practice compassion, CBCT, they are guidebooks. But this is really for the general public, and a friend of mine, when I was giving this CBCT course in Michigan a number of years ago, she said that, oh, you need to have a book written. And I said that, okay. She said that I can help you. And she was really, Amy Hurst, her name is. She was the person that who helped me kind of think through and to get the publisher to agree to publish this. But she also had a very clear understanding that this needs to be for the general public, and the timing couldn't be, more appropriate, I think, because right now what we are seeing in the world is really kind of the frame of our society, and this is where the compassion, a meaningful connection, seems so important. I'm just very lucky, fortunate that this work is allowing me to share my thoughts at this particular time when it seems like it's really needed.
It is a very fraught time in the world, for sure, as Dr. Paul alluded to, with strife in many places, including in our own hearts in many ways. And I'm reminded of whether your book talks about sort of the genesis of CBCT, the cognitively based compassion training, right here on the Emory campus. And many of the people in the audience may know that story, but I wonder if you could share the genesis of CBCT with your conversation with a particular student.
Yeah, so before I say about the student, actually the genesis of this work for me, it actually on the campus began in 1998 when His Holiness the Dalai Lama came and inaugurated the relationship with what's known as Emory-Tibet Partnership between Emory University and Drepung Losari Monastery, the monastery that where I received my training. And then that year he also was the speaker, commencement speaker at Emory. And in his address, he emphasized the importance of compassion. He said that compassion is education is a tool, but how you use that tool depends on the user. If the person comes from warm-heartedness, from a compassionate place, then your education that you will use for constructive purpose. Otherwise, knowledge can easily be used for more selfish reasons, and that can be quite destructive. So that was really an important kind of message that he gave. You recall that this is one part that in those days we didn't have social media, but the print media picked up very widely, New York Times and others. And that was the message that I took to heart as well when I started teaching here in 2000 as a faculty in the religion department. So my courses, I tried to kind of, even though those courses in those days were strictly on Buddhism, there was one course that I was teaching in Tibetan Buddhism under subtitle Psychology of Enlightenment, because I wanted to focus on not just the religion as ritual and the kind of typical aspect of religion, but focus on more what the religions, not just Buddhism, but all the major religions offer to us, as a way to live a more positive, healthy lives, and compassion is the central to that. So in that course, we had reviewed a number of different meditations, mindfulness, attention, loving kindness, and so forth, compassion. And Molly Harrington, she was a student here. She was leading an initiative here on campus for destigmatizing mental health. The mental health is often a stigma in many parts of the world still, in those days also. So that's why you see that many people who are struggling with mental health issues, often have to struggle very kind of privately, that when there's a stigma. So she was leading this initiative to destigmatize mental health. And she was in my class. Actually, there are two classes, in fall and in spring. And she was quite kind of insistent that I develop a program that can help the students here, because my understanding is that in those years there were some suicides here on the campus among the students, and so she was very persistent, and I was very fortunate to have a colleague here in those days, Dr. Chavrezand, that it really kind of very charismatic, just really brilliant researcher in the mental health field. At Emory, at the medical school, he was directing a program called Mind Body program. So that's what kind of led to the development of what's now known as CBCT, Cognitive Based Compassion Training.
And CBCT is distinctive. I don't know if it's unique. You would know better than I, but it's certainly distinctive in the degree to which it has been sort of scientifically studied and proven out. You mentioned Chuck Raison, and you worked very closely with him and others to sort of devise experimental ways to measure the impact of this mode of contemplation. And it's a fascinating convergence of your two deep paths of training and education, the ancient Tibetan Buddhist path of wisdom and sort of a modern Western scientific method. I wonder, and so we know, as Dr. Paul has mentioned, and as Dr. Crespino mentioned, that CBCT has been adopted in many places around the world, from schools to hospitals and other institutions. And I wonder, do you imagine that that there's something about the scientific basis of CBCT that makes it more acceptable in various parts of the world? In other words, you could say, look, we've demonstrated that this is effective according to these Western standards. Does that have an effect?
Well, I think let me begin by saying that demonstrating scientifically isn't kind of the tricky thing to say. When it comes to anything mental, I think a lot of the psychological, it's not just in the meditation field, the other aspect of psychological state also, a lot of the studies often done, it's self-reported.
Mm-hmm.
So to what extent you can really say that these studies are scientifically proven? I kind of just stay away from using the word proven,
right.
For that reason. But you could say that the certain studies have demonstrated the effectiveness of this practice. For example, when we designed the protocol, and with the Chuck Rezan, when we wanted to research, study, to see if CBCT, cognitive-based compassion training, can actually make a difference in terms of depression and these mental health problems. How do you study that? You know, like that. Yes, one way is you can do it through questionnaires and then in a self-reported way. But actually, like CBCT was in some ways unique in the sense that because of Chuck's own training, that what he was doing, this groundbreaking kind of findings how body is involved in communicating with the brain, not just the brain communicating with the body. And then in that, how to understand depression and these issues. So the very first study that we did with the students, freshman college students here at Emory University, from physical education class. In those days at Emory had this physical education. First year, every student had to take either fall or spring semester. So we teamed up with a person, Dr. Hadame, who was the main person overseeing the physical education in those days. With him, and we recruited students from freshman college year, and then put it in the two groups. But the measures there were to measure certain biomarkers, that they're associated with that are often highly associated with these mental health problems. For example, an immune stress marker called interleukin-6, IL-6, and this is, it's not just somebody saying that I'm feeling better, but rather the research shows that there is a high correlation between elevated levels of IL-6 that is manifested in forms of inflammation in the body, and the depression, anxiety, and these mental illnesses. As well as cortisol, the standard the cortisol, the levels of cortisol, which seems a bit more tricky than IL-6, but nonetheless, it is our standard hormone, stress hormone. So in this study, we measured that giving students a psychosocial test for the TSS, Trier Psychosocial Test, TSST. It's developed in Germany at a place called Trier. And so in this, when students are brought in front of some kind of meta judges, and then you ask them to give a talk, that on the spot. It's very stressful, apparently, that every one of us will get stressed for public speaking in that unpredictable way. So this, what we wanted to measure was the levels of IL-6 in the blood system, also the cortisol. So these are measure of the heart chemicals in your body, like that. Now, when we were designing it, our hypothesis was this, that in today's world, the elevation of these illnesses have to do with rising stress in the society, the chronic stress. The chronic stress correlating with this modern day illnesses, whether depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's, and like that. And when you look at the stress, the part of that is that we as living beings, our number one, business is to stay alive. And therefore, that anything that presents as a threat or perceived as a threat, we evolved to elicit this stress response so that we can fight, flee, like that. If in the modern world, we are seeing the world around, our own kind of situation, but the other people and like that, as more as threat. And that is what is leading us to this constant stress test. Then, what kind of these contemplative practices might be more suited for that? Yes, mindfulness-based stress reduction was already studied, very, very effective in many cases. There was another great program called Relaxation Response by Herbert Benson at Harvard. That's also great. But those practices are more, I would say, a passive way of relating to our everyday challenges. Compassion, had to do with, compassion is fundamentally understood as warm-heartedness. There's been all mentioned about compassion is between two people or more, that there's certain feeling of tenderness towards object of your compassion. There's a certain degree of, we can say, meaningful connection. And that's what I think that led us to design this. And one thing that we did was that when we had the students come to learn twice a week, and the control group met twice a week to discuss on some health-related topic, whether the nutrition or health, exercise, and like that. In these two groups, we hope to see the different hypotheses that compassion would show the difference, but we didn't see that. That after 6 weeks of training, when they were subjected to this stress test. But what we had that, anticipating there could be some, dose effect. That is how much you practice should make a difference. I mean, like whether you get in the swimming pool just once, or once every 3, 4, 5 days a week for a certain hours, would it make you better swimmer or not? The dose effect, I think that's what we wanted to see. So that we had asked the students in the meditation group to each day outside of the class practice, and we gave recorded meditation recordings, and they just had to log on to the computer and say that they practiced 0 minute or 30 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever they did. No reward, no punishment for that. And that's what that we saw in the practice group, in the meditation group. When you split them in high practice and low practice, on average, it's 15 minutes per day, really, 90 minutes per week. Then you see a significant difference between the two groups and then with the control group.
So from that has developed CBCT, which was adopted in the medical school here at Emory, and has been adopted much more broadly. And as we say, kind of around the world. It's, I'm impressed, Dr. Paul kind of alluded to this as well, that compassion in your book has very much a social dimension. It's not a one-on-one, it is partly that as well. But it really begins, I like the way you outlined in the book the 7 practices that seem increasingly to take one's self out of oneself into a very broad world, beginning with finding your source of nurturance with yourself, sort of paying attention to yourself, sort of having compassion for oneself, and then broadening those circles. And I'm curious about how difficult that process is, not having done it myself. How difficult do students find that? It probably varies from person to person.
Thank you for that. I will just finish your previous question about the research with the CBCT. Yes, the CBCT is very extensively researched. It has been studied with medical school students at Emory. It has been with the foster care children, the breast cancer survivors, suicide survivors, veterans, many different populations. In most cases, not everywhere, in most cases, you do see a difference in terms of certainly for better mental health and self-compassion, more resilient. Those you do see. So yeah, when it comes to many compassion training programs, there, every one of them, I think, is really wonderful. Randomized kind of the studies with the compassion training, the CBCT by so far has the most randomized studies. That's true. Now, with regard to this particular practice, how in terms of how those who go through this 8-week training, to what extent they are able to complete, it's really is a challenge, like this, because retention rate in the beginning, when we started offering, it wasn't that great.
Because people sort of faded out. They were able to complete the full 8 weeks.
Many are here in this room. I mean, that we have done this. So,
you all finished, right?
The finished one, yes. But many in each program, you see a certain kind of percentage of like they will drift away, and it probably has to do with how you deliver. Over the years we have become better. They're delivering it a little bit better, kind of bringing some of the best practices of delivering these programs, and now I think it's much better. But initially, in the beginning, it was not that easy for them to go through all 8 modules. The training itself, as you said, it's not simply kind of how I become more compassionate in my private life. It's really compassion. Need for compassion is so that we can contribute to better kind of relationship with those we live with, particularly, and then also through our decisions and choices, what difference we can make. So in that sense, CBCT is designed, with this 3 kind of things, with the 3 kind of layers, if you will. First and foremost, it is about how to develop better resilience with better manage our emotions. So the earlier modules focus on how to be aware of our emotions, how to find that sense of security, from there how to regulate it, and then including self-compassion. But then it goes into that how we can be more attuned to others' needs and feelings and so forth, empathy, compassion for others, and then bringing the system thinking perspective, or the interdependence lens, the broader perspective, then to see how our actions can benefit the greater communities of the world. So Daniel Goleman has this beautiful way of framing this. He calls about triple focus, 3 focuses. Inner focus has to do with be better attuned to our own inner life so that we can manage it better. Other focus has to do with better attuned to others' needs and feelings so that we can have a better interaction, more meaningful, our relationship could be more helpful and healthy. And then the outer focus has to do with bringing this systems lens to any given challenge that we may be faced, to see this from the broader context so that we can find a way to contribute to its solution.
So one of the ways that you frame this, I think, in the book is you talk about three different kinds of compassion. One is affective compassion, one is cognitive compassion, and the other is sort of motivated compassion. So the affective may be that inward look, where the cognitive takes you out into a broader circle, and the motivated compassion is putting compassion to work, as it were. Is that a fair summary, or did I completely miss that chapter?
Not completely. And I think, what the way that you are seeing has I can see.
Okay, I get a C+ on that one.
No. That also makes sense. Now,
I'm just quoting the book.
but in the CBCD, these three are referred to as the three sort of elements of compassion. Three elements in the sense that if you think about the compassion as a human value, it really is its core. The core element of compassion has to do with this warm-heartedness, that endearing feeling. Like the mother or feels towards her child, or the good friend towards another friend, this warm-hearted feeling. That is what is the heart of compassion. When you have that, and then cognitive, that's the affective, the emotional part. That compassion is fundamentally an emotional state to me, in this, according to the way that I understand Tibetan Buddhism, also the way that I see that how it is articulated in the current psychology also, like the Jamil Zaki in his War for Kindness, in books like that. But then, that warm-heartedness is one part, essential. We need to be aware of what the person is going through, what predicament they are facing. So that's the cognitive part, awareness of someone's difficulty. When these two come together, then the motivation is the natural outcome. That is to do something, that want to alleviate that suffering. So in that sense, compassion is, we define compassion as this warm-hearted concern, unfolding from witnessing or understanding the suffering of others and feel motivated to alleviate that suffering. So it's a three.
Thank you for that clarification, Professor. I think we have a microphone out here that is being carried around in case we want to offer opportunity for others to ask questions or pose comments. So see the microphone over here, and there's one in the back as well.
Stick your hand up and we'll bring you the mic.
How does compassion help address the anger that we feel toward the injustices we see?
Thank you so much for that question.
Could you repeat the question?
How the compassion help address the injustices that we are seeing? Anger. The anger with, yes, seeing when we see the injustice, yes. I think that, it's natural for us to be troubled by the injustices that we see. There's something that is really troubling. If somebody is doing things that go against our own values, against our own needs, So it's first thing I would say that it's a natural for us to feel anger, that it's a natural response in the face of the injustices or the harms But I think if you think about whether there are two things, whether does the compassion really help, right the wrong, or that if we are feeling angry about some injustice, does compassion really help address that injustice, or compassion makes you kind of weak and step away from those injustices? I think that there is sometimes there is a kind of the belief that compassion makes you weak. That compassion does not lead you to oppose someone's injustices because you've got to be nice, like that. But I think if compassion, the way that in the CVCD that we articulate, the way that His Holiness the Dalai Lama explains, compassion has this element of courage to see the injustice done, to oppose the injustices, like this. So one could have compassion, feel anger, but not be consumed by the anger. But if you focus on the action of the someone, blame the behavior. With compassion, one could blame the behavior, oppose the behavior, while not reducing the person to evil. So that's like in all traditions we talk about, distinguishing the actor from action, right? Like a person who is committing certain harmful actions or behaviors, that such a person is committing such acts because they are under the influence of certain emotions, certain circumstances that have led such a person to be in such a situation. So if we can take that into account, we can absolutely blame the behavior, but without reducing the person as evil or hating the person. Of course, it's very easy to say that, like that. I'll give you an example, actually, that I often say this. His Holiness Dalai Lama in 2008, when he was traveling in America, he was giving an interview in Seattle, I believe, with a news channel, I think CNN. And what had happened in 2008 was many Tibetan friends around the world, they saw this as an opportunity to raise awareness about the atrocity the Chinese government has been committing in Tibet against Tibetans and other people. And there was some demonstrations. Of course, some of them got out of control. There was some violence and like that. And then the Chinese state media used that to really demonize the Dalai Lama. Like all kinds of saying that he is behind those. His Holiness has been the absolute the advocate of nonviolence. He had even said to his people that if you resort to violence, I couldn't be your leader. Like this. But so Anchor was asking, all these kind of attacks that you are receiving, how you feel? How are you feeling? And His Holiness said that on the intellectually, it is, I can see it's troubling, but emotionally, I'm fine. Think about this. Intellectually, I can see that all this kind of criticism coming, it could be troubling, but emotionally, I'm fine. That is such an opposite of what I would feel. I could say that, intellectually, that I can understand, but emotionally, I'm in knots, like that. And that Anchor was actually a little taken aback, like this. So she fumbled and she said, what do you attribute that to? And His Holiness then said that, like that. I understand that when these kind of attacks happened directed towards him, he needed to rely on his practice that he has done whole life. And that is that to remind himself, mindfulness in this, reminding himself that the people, the Chinese authorities who are doing this attack, they are actually coming from a place where it's not from a healthy, good place, it's a suspicion, the anger and so forth. And he said that he reminded him in those days again and again a verse by one of the masters of the 1st, 2nd century called Aditya, where verse says that Toyam Jumbo Somala, member Tuba Mijeta, Tuba Numo Darsiki, Numo Tante in Tibetan. It was written in Sanskrit, of course, originally Tibetan now. It said that when a patient is violent, acting violently, under the influence of certain forces like illness and like that, a doctor is not hateful of the patient. Similarly, the enlightened beings see the afflictive emotions as the enemy, not the people with afflictive emotions. And he said that he had been reminding, and he's changing one word there. Instead of enlightened beings see the afflictive emotions as enemy, he said that Tenzin Gyatso, his name, Tenzin Gyatso would see the emotions, afflictive emotions as enemy, not the people themselves. So he said that that's what gives me sane. I can sleep, I can eat, I can smile, therefore the emotionally not.
Good to see that. There's another question out there. Right here. There's also a question up here, but so maybe next time.
I'm sure if
Could you speak up?
the people in here. I just shut it off. I don't like technology. I'm sure if the people in here were running the world, it would be a lot better. But unfortunately, we don't run the world. How do we get our representatives to have more of this idea of compassion and mindfulness? I'm almost afraid that our systems are set up that those people can't get elected, that they need to have. In fact, we had this discussion decades ago, you and I, where I claimed that the medical students couldn't base their approach on compassion. They had to be cutthroat to get the best grades and get into the best schools. But how do we influence the people who are really important for making the world reflect these great principles? I don't see how to do it.
Yeah, that's $1 million question. Yes, John, I think, yeah, I remember having this conversation with you.
The Lobsang is retiring at the end of this academic year to open a political consulting.
Yes, and that's my way. No, joke aside, I think it's not easy. That's absolutely, you're right. Like that. It also reflects our kind of social norms, the value. What do we value? Do we value compassion, or do we value more of individual achievement, like that? So I think change is not that easy. That particularly at that leadership level, when they are already in the kind of the thickest of the their what they do. A lot of the things they need to take into consideration. It's very difficult for sure, but I think, and that's why part of the reason why we need to bring these skills into education much earlier. And we need to take this long-term perspective to introduce the importance of values like kindness, the compassion, to help them regulate their emotions and like that much earlier in their schooling. And the C learning, social, emotional, and ethical learning, our second program in our center is precisely for that reason, that we want to bring these in education, in K-12 education, so that our future leaders, that we produce, come with that mindset. But that doesn't mean that we need to give up on our leadership at present. This is precisely one of the things that we talk about. I talk about in the book also. That when we think a problem that is quite large, it often seems it's kind of overwhelming, and we give up on that. Compassion can sometimes make you overwhelmed. But what we need to focus is on small steps, what we can do. Instead of making the entire system change, what is in our power that we can focus. There's this beautiful book, many of you have read, Compassionomics, right? It's a book on compassion in healthcare. Do we need compassion in the healthcare? And based on over 225 peer-reviewed, studies. Stephen Turchak's researcher, he presents that it's undeniable that compassion matters in the healthcare. And but there is one section, he talks that even when we cannot make difference, we can make a difference. Think about it. Even when we cannot make a difference, we can make a difference. That is what I think that whether global warming or the political kind of divides that we are seeing today, all that. We as individuals, we may not be able to kind of solve that completely, but if you map out what is contributing to where we can kind of intersect ourselves. There are a number of small ways you can vote and all those things to educate people to talk about. There are different ways. If we can focus on what we can do, those small steps, then we will not be discouraged. But at the same time, if more and more people can participate in that way, you can see the difference. A tipping point, often does not require a huge level of change. It's what, like that 4%, 50%, is that what the tip for the tipping point? I heard somewhere around 12% or something of it. So I think I would say that it's not easy. You're absolutely right, but at the same time, if we can just give up, that's not the option either. We can do what we can do.
We have a question down here.
My question to you is, how do you learn about compassion when you are developing self-awareness? For example, you believe in something all your life until you realize that wasn't the right way to believe in it. How do you unravel your upbringing or what you believe to be more compassionate?
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think something we hold so dear, and then when it becomes clear to us that that was not the helpful thing to pursue or to keep. Of course, it creates certain room for self-doubt, perhaps even with such beliefs, ideologies. If the certain things that we have done may have not been very helpful, even can cause guilt and so forth, the self-blame and like that. I think that it's in the CBCT, like all the major spiritual traditions would say, I think we need to first accept our human condition. We are human beings, with certain vulnerabilities, certain limitations. And if we can accept our human condition, that doesn't mean that we just said, oh, okay, that's, doesn't matter, but rather aware that that was not helpful. So therefore that, if we can first forgive or accept, have the self-acceptance, then we can focus to what difference we can make. The past is gone, but for the future, what we can do, and that can come from accepting our human condition. That's what we focus in CBCT, helping accepting our human condition.
Maybe the note of self-compassion is a note we should end on. Is it time? Well, thank you, Lobsang, for your wisdom, for your years of scholarship and teaching, for sharing with us in this book and by your very presence all that you demonstrate in the way of engaged compassion. And thanks to all of you for being here this evening. I think there's food and drink out in the lobby. So thank you, and Hannah may have a few words.
Just a few credit remarks really quick. Just what Geshe was sharing, I feel inspired to continue the conclusion, touching on this, making a difference, how we can make a difference. And I was going to share that when I feel myself feeling a bit discouraged, I always come back to a simple story that probably a lot of you in this room have heard, which is about a young boy on a beach covered in stranded starfish, and one by one he's picking them up and throwing them back into the ocean, and someone comes up to him and says, what are you doing? You can't possibly make a difference. There's too many starfish. And he picks up one more, throws it into the surf, and says, I made a difference to that one. So I feel like this room is full of people who are quietly, persistently picking up starfish every day. Each of us, in ways seen and unseen, is contributing to a larger movement, even just by showing up here today. So some of you, like Geshe-la, may be very far along in your personal compassion journey, but some of you may be looking for a place to start. And perhaps reading this book, Engage Compassion, is that first step. Maybe taking CBCT is that second step, we hope it is. But wherever you are on your journey, I hope you know you're leaving here as part of a community that's intentionally, systematically, and collectively working to advance a global culture of compassion. So with that, thank you again, Dean Crispino, Dean Paul, Dr. Hawk. Thank you to our partner in the Year of Compassion, the Michael C. Carlos Museum, for this beautiful space and their years of ongoing support. Thank you to our Compassion Center staff, especially Carol and Teresa, without whom this event would have not happened. And of course, to Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi, and to all of you for joining. So, as Dr. Hawk said, please enjoy some light refreshments and mingling out in the hallway. And we'll see you soon. Thanks again.